Hello, Bobakar, and any other students who might be joining me in the future. We have been learning English by walking through the Bible and learning about what Christians believe about Jesus by looking at signs and prophecies in the Bible that were written before Jesus ever came, because we believe that these signs and prophecies, they point to someone that God was sending us in the future that he wanted us to recognize. And so if we look at what God said about this person who was to come, we can see if Jesus is that person or if someone else may be that person. So what we've covered so far, some of the signs and prophecies we have covered, are that this person will be the offspring of a woman, or he will be a human being. He will also be a wounded Savior, so he will save everyone, but he will be wounded or injured in the process. We looked at the story of Noah, who went into a large boat to escape the flood waters that God had sent on the earth. And we noted that this is very similar to what Jesus taught about salvation through baptism in water, which is what Christians do to show that they have believed in Jesus to be saved. We also went through the story of Abraham and how he went up the mountain to sacrifice his son Isaac, and how God provided a lamb in his place to be sacrificed, and this is why we celebrate Tabaski or Seliba now. So now I wonder, what has been your favorite story so far? And maybe you can take some time to pause and tell that story back to yourself out loud to practice the English, or maybe even pause to tell the story to someone else. But moving on, we come to the next part of the story. So this is after Abraham's son Isaac, who was saved, grew up to be an adult, and God made a promise to Isaac, just like he did to his father Abraham. In that promise, he said, "I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and will give them all these lands, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed." Isaac had a son who was named Jacob, who also received a promise from God. You can look at that now. It says, "Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the east and to the west, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring." So we see that God has made the same promise to 3 generations: Abraham, his son Isaac, and his son Jacob. So that must be a serious promise for God to make it 3 different times. And so this is a promise that we believe very much. And this is the reason that Christians still call God the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We believe that all people will be blessed through this person who is coming. So not just one people group, not just the Bambara or the Fulani or any other people group alone, but all people will be blessed through this person who God is sending to us. If at any point you have questions about the vocabulary, you can pause the video when I'm done reading, and you can go and look up certain words that you do not know. If you still have questions about vocabulary, you can comment them below, and I will help you to understand them. So moving on, at some point, Jacob, the grandson of Abraham, begged God to bless him. And so God renewed his promise and changed Jacob's name to Israel. He said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." So this is how the nation of Israel was began. And one day, a famine caused Jacob, now known as Israel, his family to move to Egypt to find food. Jacob was afraid to move away from his home, but this is what God said to him. He said, "I am God, the God of your father," he said. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes." And so the people of Israel were living and growing in size in Egypt. The next thing that happened was that Jacob, whose name was also Israel, remember, he had 12 sons. These 12 sons would become 12 tribes of Israel. And before he died, Jacob blessed each one of his sons, but he gave a special blessing to one, and that one's name was Judah. And this is the blessing that he gave to Judah. He said, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his." So, this is another prophecy from Jacob that is telling us that the person that we are waiting for will come from one specific tribe of Israel out of the 12 tribes, the tribe of Judah. So, is this true of Jesus? It would have to be for Jesus to be the person we are looking for. So let's look at Jesus's genealogy. If you don't know what a genealogy is, it is a record of your ancestors. And so you remember all the names of the ancestors that came before you, so that you know where you came from. And Jesus's disciple, or his student, Matthew, he wrote down the genealogy or the ancestry of Jesus. And so we can read some of that here. It says, "Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez, and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram." And if you look at this chapter in the Bible, it is very long because there are many people between Abraham and Jesus, because it is a long time. But if we skip down, we see it pick up again, and it says, "And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary, or Miriam, was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah." And so we can see that Jacob had Judah, and long after, just like Jacob foretold, Jesus came through the line of Judah, from the tribe of Judah. So that closes Genesis, the first book of the Bible. So now we will go into Exodus, the second book of the Bible. And this book is very much about Moses. which is very exciting, or Musa. And so to start off Exodus, I said before that the Israelite community was growing very large in Egypt, and the king of Egypt, called Pharaoh, forced them into slavery because he was afraid of them because they were growing in size. And so he forced them to be slaves. Remember, as I'm reading, if you want to pause the video and look up any words that you don't know, and then unpause it when you're finished. And if you still don't understand, you can comment below, and I will answer any questions that you have. So as we start reading Exodus, it says, during that long period, the period of slavery for the Israelites, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. So it's for this reason that God came to Moses with a plan to save his people. And here is that plan. It says, "Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. So take note here of the angel of the Lord. It says that the angel of the Lord was in the bush that God spoke to Moses from. The angel of the Lord is a very mysterious or strange figure in the Bible. So for now, we can just remember this figure because he will be talked about later and it will be clarified who he is. But for now, we can put a question mark behind this mysterious figure. So moving on, God said, So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. So I have a question for you. What name does God give himself here? And what do you think that means? You can comment below, or you can just think about it to yourself, or speak it out loud to yourself to practice your explanation. And when you're ready, I can talk about what that means. So, the name here, I am, is the name that God gives for himself. And this name is Yahweh, or Jehovah in Hebrew. But here it is translated into English, and it means I am. So, can we see similarities in this name that God gives himself and what Jesus said about himself? Remember that one of the three things that we said that Christians believe about Jesus is that he is God. And so, if this is true, we should be given some signs as to this being true, that Jesus is God in a human body. And so, to tell this, let's look at something that Jesus himself said to the Pharisees. First of all, who were the Pharisees? The Pharisees were religious rulers in the day of Jesus. They were passionate about God's law, or Sharia, but they were not pure in their hearts. And so they were always challenging Jesus. And this is one occasion in which they challenged Jesus, and we can see what he said here. So it begins with Jesus saying, "Very truly, I tell you, whoever obeys my word will never see death." That's a pretty bold claim from Jesus. Whoever obeys my word will never see death. It's these kinds of claims and statements from Jesus that were making the Pharisees so angry at Jesus, because they thought that he was arrogant or prideful. The Pharisees replied to Jesus and said, "Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did the prophets. Who do you think you are?" So this is great because the Pharisees are asking Jesus, "Who do you think you are? Are you greater than Abraham?" And this is great for us because this conversation has been recorded in the Bible, and we're going to hear from Jesus' own mouth who he thinks he is. And so let's listen to what Jesus has to say. He tells the Pharisees, "Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. You are not yet 50 years old," they said to him, "and you have seen Abraham?" "Very truly, I tell you," Jesus answered, "before Abraham was born, I am." I have a question for you here, an English grammar question. What tense is this "I am" in? You can think about it for a moment. Couldn't Jesus have said here, "I was"? He could have. He could have said, "Before Abraham was born, I was." It makes more sense to say "I was" rather than "I am." So why do you think he used that tense? I believe that the answer is because Jesus, when answering the Pharisees, purposefully chose the name of God that God gave to Moses. Jesus, after being asked, "Who do you think you are?" Jesus replied, "I am." We didn't talk much about what "I am" means, but hopefully you thought about it a little bit. And one thing that "I am" means is that I exist. Okay, but we all exist. But God, he had the first existence. He is the thing that exists, that gives all other things existence. Nothing could exist without God. This is why God calls himself "I am." And this is why Jesus also calls himself I am. So now Moses knows who it is who is sending him to free the Israelites from Egypt. It is the I am. So next, we have God telling Moses how he is going to free the Israelites. And he says this to Moses. He says, "Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians, and I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord." So God has promised to save the Israelites from Egypt. How does he do that, though? Does anyone watching know how it is that God made Pharaoh let his people go? It is a very popular story. What did he send to Egypt? The answer is he sent 10 plagues. What is a plague? A plague is, it can be many things, but it's like to send a sickness or something bad to attack the people. And so the plague, they were things like sores on their body, or even bugs to come and eat their food, and many other things. But he sent 10 of them. And Pharaoh, he was very stubborn. His ears were hard, or his klo were kagele. And so he did not give up until the last plague. And see, we will look at the last plague together. So this is the last plague that God sent to free the Israelites. He said, "Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh who sits on the throne to the firstborn son of the female slave who is at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well." So every firstborn child in Egypt was to be killed. But this meant that the Israelites' children would be killed as well. And so God made a plan for them to survive the plague. And this is that plan. There's a lot on this page, but we'll read it together. It says, "Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and the tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt." When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the doorframe and will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. Then tell them, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians. Then the people bowed down and worshipped. The Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. So I have a question for you. Is there a picture or a sign of Jesus that you can see in this event that is commonly called the Passover? Well, let's read what some of the students of Jesus wrote about him by comparing it to this Passover event. First, one of Jesus' students wrote, "Get rid of the old yeast so that you may be a new unleavened batch, as you really are, for Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed." So here, a student of Jesus named Paul, he is calling Jesus, or Christ, which is the Messiah, or Al-Masih, he is calling him the Passover lamb. So he's comparing Jesus to the lamb that was killed, whose blood was put on the doorframe so that the destroyer would pass by the house and not harm anyone inside. Let's look at another student of Jesus' words. He said, "He did not enter," meaning Jesus, "he did not enter by means of the blood of goats and calves, but he entered the most holy place once and for all by his own blood, thus obtaining eternal redemption. The blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer sprinkled on those who are ceremonially unclean sanctify them so that they are outwardly clean. How much more then will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself unblemished to God, cleanse our consciences from acts that lead to death, so that we may serve the living God." And so again, Jesus is being compared to the lamb that was sacrificed. But unlike the lamb, which only makes us clean on the outside, Jesus' sacrifice, his students tell us, makes us clean on the inside, so that our consciences are cleansed. I don't know if you know what a conscience is, but when you do something bad and you feel guilty about it, and you feel like you are a terrible person and you ask God for forgiveness, but sometimes you still feel very, very bad. What the student of Jesus is saying here is that the sacrifice of Jesus, it saves us from that. It cleanses our consciousness or our consciences so that we don't have to be worried anymore. And when we're not worried, when we're not scared, it says that we may serve the living God. So you can serve God much better when you're not afraid and when you're not worried about what you've done in the past. So Christ is our Passover lamb, and it's by his sacrifice on the cross and by his blood that Christians believe we are saved. And this whole story of Moses is a picture or a sign of what was to come in Jesus. So after the Israelites were saved in the Passover, how did they escape from Egypt? We can read about that here. Once they left Egypt, it says, "Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove back the sea, back with a strong east wind, and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left." So how was Moses saved? He was saved by passing through the sea. He walked right across through the water. What other story does this make you think of? It makes me think of the story that we have already talked about of Moses, who was provided a boat, and he was saved also through the waters. We talked before about how this is a sign of baptism, which is the Christian's way that Jesus taught us to declare our faith in him and to be saved through water, just like Moses and Noah were saved through water. That's all for today for the reading the Bible. This is our updated list of signs and prophecies here. So you see, we have added just today that whoever this person is, all peoples will be blessed through him. Not just some, not just one people group, but all people. He will also come from the tribe of Judah. We also took note of the angel of the Lord who is in the bush with God speaking to Moses, and we'll talk more about him next time. Then we talked about how God said that his name that he was giving to Moses was I am, and we talked about what that means. We also talked about how Jesus, when asked by the Pharisees or the religious rulers of his day who he was, he told them that he also was the I am, existent even before Abraham was born. We also looked at the story of the Passover, which is another story of a sacrificial lamb. So very similar to the Abraham story. Both are stories of us being saved through the sacrifice of something else, pointing to this person who would come in the future. And then lastly, very similar to the Noah story, Moses was saved through the water of the sea, as God split the sea and Moses walked through. And as Noah went through the sea in his boat, so now we believe that as we're baptized, believing in Jesus, we can be saved. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've enjoyed seeing all of the signs and prophecies. All of these were written and really happened long before Jesus ever came, long before any of his students that we have read from ever wrote down their words. And so I hope you can see that these things are all pointing to one person. If you join again next time, we will talk about what happened as the Israelites escaped into the wilderness. And the wilderness is a place where there's no food and no water. So how did they survive out there? And also, another very exciting topic that we'll talk about next week is the law, or Sharia. So we will talk about how God gave Sharia to us, and how that Sharia is also a sign pointing toward the person that we are waiting for. So thank you for joining me again. If you didn't understand some things, try to find out the answers on your own. If you still have questions, feel free to comment below and ask me anything, whether it's just a single word or whether it's the meaning of a passage or the meaning of something I said. I can rephrase it for you or anything like that. Okay, I will see you next time. Bye.